Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video we are going to be talking about the Landmass plugin. The Landmass plugin is a tool that we can use to quickly put down a landscape without even using a third-party program. So as you can see, I have some nice landscape around here with some cool mountains that I can paint on later on. And I didn't use Gaia, I didn't use any third-party program. I just did it all here in Unreal with the blueprint brushes, again because it's really hard to sculpt something like this by hand, especially doing it in the amount of time that I'm going to do it in this video. And we also have this nice layer, so if I turn this off, you're gonna see that I have a kind of like a non-destructive process going on here. Before we get started, remember there is the Patreon. I also have a link for the Flip Normal websites. If you use that link to buy anything on Flip Normal, so give a kickback to the channel without any extra cost to you. Remember to follow me on Twitter. There's the Discord, and if not, just leave a comment, leave a like for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe if you haven't, and ring that bell for notification. All right, here we are in a new level, and I was already making a landscape, but before we do that, you have to make sure that you have these plugins on. So you go to settings, you go to plugins, and you're gonna make sure that you have Landmass activated. Otherwise, you're not going to be getting some of the options that I'm gonna be using here. So make sure you have this plugin on. It's gonna ask you to restart, and then you can come back to what we're doing again. Now, all you have to do is make sure the enable edit layers is checked. And another thing that I wanted to talk about is how to get a higher resolution landscape without having to have a huge terrain. So I did this in one of my previous videos, but I'm just gonna go over it again. So as you can see, I have 63 quads, 2 sections, 4 components, and this is the resolution that I'm getting. So if I turn back to 100, you're gonna see that this is actually very big terrain. So 505, it is really big terrain, but what we want is a high resolution terrain and something that's not that big. So the way you can achieve that is just by reducing this. You can always change the scale of this. I'm actually going to do 60%. The Y changes as well. The Z is not going to change because there's nothing going up. And you can see that the resolution gets concentrated because you have all those cells in a much smaller space. And this is going to help with all these blueprints that we're going to be using, all these brushes. So we get a nice fall off. Now I'm going to say create. It's going to give me my landscape, and we can start using the Landmass brushes. So the way you're gonna get those is by going over here into blueprints, but don't worry, thankfully the content has already provided us with some blueprints, so we're not gonna be constructing anything in this tutorial. We're just going to be using the ones that come with the standard content. So you can see that I do have a couple of options here that you may not. In case you have not enable the water plugin, there's some of here that you'll not be able to see, but the main one that we're going to be used, which is the one that comes with the Landmass plugin, is this custom brush landmass, and we're also going to be using custom brush material only, so make sure you have those. So I'm going to start with custom brush landmass, and once you click on that the first time, if this is a brand new project, then it's going to compile shaders a little bit. So just wait for that, and then just click somewhere in your terrain, and you're gonna get this nice pyramid. Now, one of the things that I've seen with this, especially when it's compiling, is that if you place your actor right away, because this is a brand new actor in the world, sometimes your terrain will disappear. Just hit Ctrl-Z for undo, and then click on it again, and it will be there. I don't think that's a bug. I just think the program has not compiled the shaders, because this apparently has to do with some shaders, the way that this is done. So now we have a nice pyramid. So if you want to make a pyramid, that'll be it. But we're gonna make something a little bit more interesting. So the way that this works is by using splines. So if you've seen my video on the water, you're gonna see that your spline can carve your terrain. the water is actually based on this landmass plugin, which is actually what I'm doing right now. So you can move your spline points like that and just move them around just to decide the shape of your mountain. And you can also add spline points to it. So let's add a couple of spline points. So I just right click on top of the spline and I'm getting this little menu. I can add another spline point right here. And I could, if I wanted to, add another spline point right here, just to add a little bit more variation. And if you were to click on the last point, and if you hold the key of Alt and then drag, you're gonna see that you get another spline point. So those are the ways if you wanted to add some more spline points. So I'm just going to get this to a size. Let's say this is a background mountain. So let's just get this to a particular size where I'm actually happy with. I think this should be fine, and we can decide other things a little bit later. So once you have your splines set up the way you want it, and if we come back here, you can see that this looks fairly flat and can use a little bit of a touch. So what we can do is we go back into select mode, and we can just go into the landmass brush. So the custom actor here. So just click here, and you're gonna see that over here on the right, we have some parameters that we can play with. So right now, we're going to be playing with the ones over here. These are the ones that are going to give us the variation to our mountain. So I'm going to maybe move the curl strength a little bit, and you're gonna see how this starts changing. I can actually modify this a little bit, and it's even creating some mountains outside of the range. So it's creating this baby mountain right here, which is fine. It's kind of like a hill, and you can keep on doing this. And as you can see, we have a nice background mountain, and you can play with this value over here. Let's just do 0.5. I think that's enough. Then we have another type of curl. Let's play with this and see what we get. And as you can see, it's another variation that we have. So again, this is a very easy and quick way to sculpt a landscape or a terrain if you don't want to use a separate program. Now, below that, we have the curl tiling, and we have curl tiling for number 1 and for number 2. So for number 1, you're gonna see that we have 16, but if I turn that down to 1, you're gonna see that this gets really flat. So it depends on how much of the tiling you want to add to your mountain to get a little bit more variation. So let's do 20. You're gonna see that I have plenty of variation over here, and if I increase the second one to, let's say, 15, I have even more variations, and I start getting some weird glitches. So there is a limit on how you should use that. So just don't overdo it. Just get it to a place where you have some nice mountains that you are happy with. Now, if you have this mountain right here, and let's say I wanted the mountain to look a lot softer, what I could do is play with the blur size. So if I increase this to 4, it's actually going to flatten my mountain a little bit, but it's going to kind of like smooth it out. So if you want to use that, this curl noises, it's using a noise texture. So imagine if you blur that noise texture, it's going to soften up the edges. So if you want to look at it another way, is as if you were using the smooth brush. So if I turn this down to 0, you're gonna see that we get a lot of jagged edges and it looks so horrible. So let's do 1, and we have some nice looking mountains. All right, now let's keep going down these options. Now we have a displacement option right here. This displacement option will be using this texture that we have over here, and we also have a tiling control for it. So let's just type something, it's a big value like 500. You're gonna see that there's a little bit of a variation there, but let's just go overboard with 1200, just so we can see an actual change. And you're gonna see that the displacement map not only makes our mountain go up, but it also makes our mountain go down. And this is one of the things why I was talking about using a higher resolution mesh, because at some point you're going to start getting these kind of issues. Now let's play with the tiling and see what happens. Let's put this to 5, and as you can see, if you increase the tiling, well, you get this effect right here. And again, you have to play with the resolution of your landscape. You could always resize your landscape after the fact, so that's a good thing. But I'm gonna bring this down to something that's not as much, like 2. And I'm probably gonna bring this down to like 250. So it's not terribly displaced. We could add a little bit more variation with something that we're gonna use later. So another thing that we have in our brush is the blend mode. Some of these blend modes will react like if you've used Photoshop or any texturing program. You can come here and see that you have a min, which will give you a different effect. If you have a max, this one's actually not doing anything. If you have an additive, it's also not doing anything. And the way these modes will react more is when you have actual layers. So I'm just going to leave it to alpha blend. Now, if I go back into my landscape and I go here, what I can do is I can select my brush and I can actually hold Alt and duplicate it. So we get a duplicate of our brush. And the cool thing is, as you can see, as I move it, it has a variation over the terrain. So even if you move it around with the same spline, you're going to get a different type of mountain. So I'm just going to rotate it a little bit. Actually, I like this. So let's just place this around here so we can have some nice mountains in the background. This will be kind of like the in-between. And another thing that I want to show you is that you can always add layers. So if you right click here on the layer section and hit create, I'm going to create another layer. So let's say I wanted to throw another brush here in this layer. All right, so let's just do some quick adjustments here. And now that we have this in their layer, you're gonna see that it interacts with the mountains that we have over here, but we could also turn it off. So this is a good part of this. This is a non-destructive process. So let's say you're just adding mountains all around this and you say, okay, I don't like the effect that I'm getting of here. Let's see how it looks. You could always turn this one off and it goes away. So let's just move this one around here, and I'm gonna actually rotate it this way and put it over here like that. Let me just pull this out a little bit more so we can get a little bit more of a mountain chain. And another thing that we can do here is there is a cap shape. So if I click this button, you're gonna see that I get more of one of those flat shaped mountains. So this is good if you're making kind of like some smaller mountains for a platformer. You can do this. And you can also, I think plateau is the term for that. And you can also make it taller. So let's write here 1500, and you can see we have a giant plateau over here. So maybe 1500 it's too much. Let's do 350, something like that. So this is a nice plateau if you wanted to make that. Actually, I'm just going to leave it as the mountain how it was before. And another thing that you can do is you can actually carve in if you wanted to. It's not just up, you can also go down and you can create this kind of like crevice on top of the terrain. So there's many things that you could do with these brushes. Now let's talk about the other brush that I mentioned. So if we go here into landscape mode, and we're gonna go over here and we're going to select the brush called custom brush material only. So what this brush is going to do is this is going to allow us to add noise to the terrain. So this is the more interesting brush where it actually is encompassing the whole terrain. So if you wanted to and you didn't want to have mountains like this, you could just use this brush. And the good thing about this brush is you can move it around and it actually creates some variations. So if you want to create some variations right away, all you have to do is move it around and we get some nice distortion of the terrain as if it was sculpted. This will be something very hard to do with hand sculpting. And again, if you don't want to use a third-party program, this is the best solution. Now, if we go into the parameters, you're going to see that we do have the same parameters as the previous materials, but we do have also this right here. So this is what's going to kind of control the distortion that we are seeing here on the terrain, which actually looks really good from the distance. And you're going to see here that we have tiling. So let's just play with the tiling. We can tile this even lower and you get something a little bit flatter, or we can tile it a little bit higher and you get something a lot noisier. So you also have elevation scale, which is going to control the height. So if we do 200 instead of 1000, you can see that that comes down. So let's do 700 instead of 1000 and we get a little bit of noise, but we don't have that much elevation. And as you can see, this is also affecting our mountains. Now the elevation pre-offset is going to kind of smooth that the little bit of noise that we have here. So if I type a number like, let's say 1, you're gonna see that it actually flattens this out. So I'm actually not gonna touch the pre-offset. I don't think it's really nice. We can also play with the seeds. So if you want to have some variations of this, you can do a higher seed and you can actually scroll it and you can see it in real time how it waves, and actually it looks really nice how it's waving. And you can decide whether you want to keep that or not. Now there's also invert. So with invert, this actually is reacting with the noise map. So if you invert the noise map, you're again going to get a different effect, and you can see that my mountains completely change. We also have octaves, and octaves is what's giving the noise its details. So if I go into, let's say 2, you're going to see that that detail goes away. If we go to 1, the detail goes away even further. Now, if we do a crazy value like 10, there's not much of a change because there's a limit to the octave. So we could do 25 and you can see that it actually doesn't change anything. So we can go back to 7 and it stays. So there's the limit that we have. We can actually reduce this by going down a little bit, and you can see that the change is a little bit subtle in the numbers that are close to the limit. Now the persistence is another parameter where you can add some detail to this, and if we do something like, let's say 0.6, you're gonna see that it starts adding a little bit more noise to our map. This may be probably too high, so let's leave it at 0.5, and I think this will give us a very nice landscape. All right, now there is another feature that this has that I think it's really nice, and it has to do with the materials. So let me just select my landscape and I'm going to throw in my blend material that I did with some Megascans. By the way, if you want to see how I did this blend material, there's going to be a link in the description down below for that video. And I'm just going to throw this one in and you're going to see that it turns black because I haven't set up my layer. So I'm just going to go into landscape. I'm going to go into paint and make sure that I do have some information layers for this. So as soon as I add some information layers, everything comes up. And there you go. So we have some landscape material, and I'm not gonna worry about the size of this just yet. I just want to show you how these brushes can also control the material parameters if you have a landscape blend material. So we have 3 types of layers over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into select, and I'm going to select my first brush. My first brush should be this one right here. So we're going to look at that and we're going to see the changes on top of it. Now for that, you're gonna see that we have a tab that's called Paint Layers. So for this, you need to add an array. So if you click here, you'll be adding an array. And you need to give this the same name of your layers inside your blend material. So I'm going to give this one layer A. I also had layer B and C. And you're gonna see instantly that as soon as I type layer B, this changed because it's now taking in the information of layer B. Let me add layer C as well. There you go. There was another change to that because it added the 3 layers. So now, as you can see, this actually looks a lot better. So you could use this to get some variation in your material when you're doing the layer blending with them. And these also have some parameters that you could tweak. Now let's change, let's say we want to completely turn off layer C. So we'll go into our final opacity and just type 0. And we completely turned off that one. We can turn it back on this way. And we also have a texture here that is helping us with kind of like the blending in between all of them. So one of the things that we can look at is the fall off width. So that is how this is mixing with the rest of the terrain. So all the way up to here, we have the brush and then we have our landscape. When it comes to some of the parameters over here, we can actually play with the fall off width right here. And let's say we want to do 1500. You're going to see that actually that fall off is increasing and it's going out even further. So we can actually reduce it if we wanted to. And it's closer now to the brush. And we can also use edge offset for that purpose. So let's just say 500 here. And let's say the offset is going to be also 500. Now you're going to see that pretty much our edge is increased to the outside of this. Now over here we have some values where we can actually change how the texture is reacting. And this is my favorite value over here, is the mask using a band. So if we check this one, we actually, instead of let me turn off one of the layers. So I'm going to turn off layer C. Now what it's doing is actually adding layer B as a band around my brush. So as you can see, this is what's going on right here. If we actually uncheck this, now the second layer, it's actually on top of the whole brush. Or we could just do this and we have some nice transition from the bottom. So again, it depends on how you want your materials to be on your landscape, but this is an excellent feature that will allow you to play with those materials without even having to paint, because as you can see, I'm not even painting here. I can just create a different material around here and it actually looks really nice. So aside from painting with the brush, you can also paint with the paint function still. So you see that I'm painting on top of the brush. So if you wanted to add any other details to it, you can also do that. And by the way, all I did here was increase the tiling of the grass that was looking a little bit ridiculous. And again, watch that video on the blend materials if you want to know a little bit about that. Alright everybody, that is it for this video. I just wanted to show you how you could use the Landmass brushes to just create a quick landscape. You see that we created some very nice landscape here that we can paint on, and you can use the blend materials to paint with a brush, or you can paint on it by yourself. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, there's a Patreon, there's that link for flip normals. Also, follow me on Twitter. I usually post my stuff over there too. There's the Discord, and I'll see you in the next video.